My name is Randy Kemp. I'm Choctaw, Mvskoke Creek in Euchee. Actually, I'm from the little town Bixby and Sapulpa, but I live out in Arizona now. I'm a self-taught flautist, and I don't know how to read or write music. So I've been playing flute for about 28 years. There was a time where I only thought that flutes were just for me to practice in the studio, and I didn't tell anyone that I was learning the flute because I was kind of like embarrassed when you first learn an instrument. It's not the best, sounding portion of that. But I said, well, this is for me because I'm a painter and printmaker as an artist, a mixed media artist, and so on. I would go to my studio just before I started to paint or print or do whatever. I would practice the flute. So how that happened is that we had a flute maker in our studio, but we put him outside because he make, made a lot of noise and so on. Not with the flutes, but with the instruments. So, and one day I went out there to get a flute, and I just like I want to learn. I want to learn an instrument, and this seems to be like the thing to kind of easy to haul around. You get a little small flute and put it in your pocket, and you're ready to go. So this guy was making flutes on the outside. I went out there and I said, Jonah, I want to learn how to play the flute. And he's so busy that he didn't even look up at me. He was just like whittling away at the holes and sanding things down. He goes, yeah, go ahead and grab a flute, cover all the holes, and blow into it. And I said, that was it. And I kind of thought that like, is that all there is to it? So I went back inside into my studio, and it wasn't like that. I mean, it just like I was fumbling. I didn't even know how these things work on top, or I didn't even know how to hold the flute as well. I think I even had it backwards. So I was like, I don't even know which way. And then it sounded like that kind of sound, and I thought, oh man, we got a long way to go. So, but this is what I did before I started my artwork, and I facing the canvas and stuff, and I didn't have any ideas, so I would just play and practice until something in my mind that is like, oh, okay, I can stop this and start painting now. So I kind of learned all these things for myself, and I didn't know that I was probably doing some things different, and I probably was doing some things kind of weird about playing the flute, and I did things sounding different as well. This is some of the techniques that I've learned and so on. When you heard sounds like you're using your tongue, you're just kind of blowing into it and using your tongue, and then you're just like, oh, well, that's cool, even just by itself. I can create a song about that. But then I thought about, well, what is that sound they make or they do that makes this sort of trail sound? So, and I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And all that is if you can roll your R's, that's all that is. It's like, so I was like, oh, okay, okay, I'm getting this a little bit. So I'm trying to kind of study different sounds as I'm hearing them from these flute players that have already gone ahead and did their thing. And I just didn't know if that's the way they learned it, but I just kind of like mocking that sound, kind of a mockingbird technique. So I started doing that, and so from there you just start building songs. You just like, oh, okay, I learned that today, and put that flute away and I start painting. Go back the next day and it's like, oh yeah, yeah, what was that sound like? And start creating sounds. And as you're putting things together, you start getting some relatively songs, I guess. But I wanted to think about how flutes are how flute songs are made, and so I first wanted to have a connection with my tribe, the Euchee tribe, and we're a southeastern tribe around the Macon, Georgia area. So I was living in Arizona, and my mom was living here in Oklahoma in Sapulpa, and I said, "Well, that's who I need to call." And I said, "Hey, mom, I'm learning how to play the flute, but I want to learn what our tribe has a connection to this." And she said, "Well, I'll talk to some folks." And I said, "Okay, I'll give you about a week or 2 weeks, and I'll give you a call back." And so I gave her 2 weeks just to make sure. And she found out that these flutes were kind of a calling device. So if you can imagine the region where we were living in the southeast, that there was a lot of forest area, and they're really thick back in there. Back in Georgia, Macon, Georgia specifically, where our mounds are, there is a lot of trees there. So when our people would go out to into the woods, sometimes they would need to have them come back to the campsite, and so they would yell, "Hey, come in here," or "Hey, come on back," and the voice wouldn't carry very long. It would hit the edge of the forest and it would just drop off. So people who were in the forest couldn't hear it. So this is why the flute came around, and we're talking about the river cane flute. So it didn't really have any melodies and so on. It just had notes, like. So when they heard that, that actually was something they could hear in the thicket of the forest. So that was. So when you heard that, that's when they came back. They could actually hear that sound. So I said, "Wow, okay. That means that I could use these flutes." And I was telling my mom, I could use these flutes now as a calling device for when I perform. It's something that brings people in. So when I'm playing, I know that there are other people that aren't in this room will probably come here because they heard this funny sound. They're like, "Oh, what is that?" They may not even know it's a flute, but they come. So like those two guys. Yeah. So uh, one of the things I try to figure out is like, well, how do you make up flute songs? And like I said, I don't write or read the music, so I don't really know that structure. I haven't academically been trained for any of that. But I have friends who play instruments, and I play with other guitars and other instruments and so on, that have that academic background. And so they would say, like, "Oh, we're going to play in the key of A." And I go, "Okay, key of A. I got it." And I'll just kind of fumble around, like, "Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, yeah." And then I got wise to understanding what that meant, and I've got like probably more than 15 flutes up here, and you can come up later to look at them, that have various keys. So now I caught on to that. I understood that, and it makes sense that you play in the same key as a guitar, because you don't want to hurt anyone's ears, and like, oh, that's terrible. So I got the right keys now. So I've learned that part, right? Um, but I wanted to know how do songs happen? And for me, I'm taking my life experiences directly from my life and put songs to it. So, for instance, this is one that I came up with. One of the first songs that I've actually composed when I was learning the flute, and it was about a time where I was a small warrior, here in Oklahoma, and we'd go down to southern Oklahoma to the Eufaula area to visit my grandmother, and we would drive all day. We started here in Tulsa, drive all day, and I always thought my parents were lost all the time because it took so long to get there. But there were so many dirt roads and things that they saw that there was a building that they had to turn left on, and way back in there where there's no signs and stuff. And I always thought, man, where do they know where they're going? And I know they know where grandma's house is, but I didn't know that. And then they were just driving all day long. I'd sit in the back of the station wagon. I would just like watch the world go by. It's like that was like the best seat in the house, watching all the small towns that we passed through. But we'd get to grandma's house late at night, and so it'd be really dark, and we just kind of found places to sleep in the house and all of that. And my parents would stay up a little later and talk to grandma a little bit. So I was out. I was like, oh, I'm going to sleep. And I got up the next morning because I heard someone walking around in the house. And it's one of those wooden floors that has that lots of creak and stuff. You could almost feel the weight and change in the walking. And then I got up and I walked out into the kitchen, and my grandma was there. And I said, Grandma, what are you doing? She goes, Oh, I'm getting ready to make some breakfast. Like, oh, okay. Is there anything I can do? Can I help you? She goes, yeah, yeah. We need some eggs. We need some eggs for breakfast. Why don't you go down to the chicken house and get some eggs for us? And I said, oh, I can do that. I'm a small warrior. I can do that. And she says that when you go out into the porch, there's a wire basket out there. Take that wire basket and go get the eggs. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I went out to the porch, and sure enough, there's a wire basket on the ground. I picked that up, and I started going down the stairs and ready to head down to the chicken house. And she said, wait, before you go down there, remember, do not wake up the chickens. And I thought in my little brain, I was like, how do chickens sleep? On their sides, standing up, feet up in the air? I don't know how they slept. And I was thinking, okay, I won't wake up the chickens. And so I headed off down this little path. It was like a windy little meandering path. And sure enough, there was a little building out there, which was supposedly the chicken house. So I went inside, and it was so dark in there, but I knew I was in the right place because of the aroma was happening. Yeah, that hit me right away. So I put the wire basket down, and I started grabbing these eggs and put them in the basket. And there's like different tiers of levels where the chickens were, and I was putting them in the basket, putting them in the basket. And I had a pretty good amount of eggs in the basket, but I thought I'm really hungry and I want a big omelet. I'm thinking, I'm going to get one more egg. So I reached as high as I could to the top tier. I was like, oh, and I found one, and I had it in my hand. And as I was pulling down the egg, I bumped the chicken, and "Rock, rock, rock, rock," and oh, it was so deafening. It was like 15 of these chickens going off. It was so loud, it scared me. I ran in place. It was like the worst car alarm you've ever heard. It was like, ah, and I was trying to run out, and I dropped a few eggs. They cracked. All I remember about that is that we had scrambled eggs that morning. And this is sort of the memory that caused me to think about that time, because my grandparents had chickens. They relied on chickens, and they were out in the middle of nowhere, and they had their garden, cow, horses. And it was a time where it was amazing that they knew where their food was coming from. They had food sovereignty, and this was green before it was green. And so what this did to me is like, I want to keep that memory. But it's a strange memory, I know. It's a memory about chickens. I made this song up. This is kind of one of the first songs I actually put together. And so I'm going to play this now. This is called the Chicken Song, or Tear the Roof Off the Chicken House, or something like that. I put everything I knew up to that point into this song. So here it goes. So if you know this song, go ahead and dance or do whatever you can do. chicken song. Thank you. It's interesting to me that I got this far with playing flute and doing performances and so on because that wasn't my ideal of learning to play the flute. I didn't even visualize being in front of people at all, and that kind of intimidated me and so on. But in Arizona, they have an open mic night, uh, but it's at a hospital at the Mayo Clinic, and it's a pretty big hospital. And then they have an open mic station in the hospital down in the lower level. So I thought at the time that, oh, no one knows me. I can go over there and play and just practice and see what happens. And so I went over there to the hospital, and sure enough, there was a mic like this, and there was a piano. And I don't play piano, but I act like I sat down for a little bit, and I go, no, I didn't do that. So I got up, got my flutes out, and so I was just playing all the songs that I knew. Like I had maybe 4 or 5 songs underneath my belt. I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. No one said anything to me. No one threw anything at me, and I thought, hey, I'm going to get out of this okay. It's like good, and I got some music in, and I was packing my stuff up, and sure enough, there comes a nurse over to me and says, I thought, oh, I'm in trouble or something. She says, hey, can you come up with me and we'll go upstairs and you can play that last song that you played upstairs and we'll go from there. And so we got further back into the hospital there, and finally we got to this area. It was a kind of a nurse's station in the round, and there's all these rooms, like 4 or 5 rooms with patients in them. And she said, "Well, if you could stand right here and play that song that you were just playing, and then I'll tell you what's up after that." I had this double chamber flute, and this is the instrument I was using. And so you can see the 2 chambers here. There's 2 air sources back here, so that you can change sides when you're playing. It does take about the same amount of air for 2 flutes, so sometimes the songs are shorter. But I played this song, and then I'll tell you the rest of the story. Thank you. So then I opened my eyes, and by the time I finished the song, all the conversations have gone away and they were down to whispers. And all I could hear was the machinery of the patients and so on. And actually, some of the patients were standing at the doorway. And then I was told that this was the palliative care unit of the hospital. And when I was told that, I thought, wow, they touched me as much as I touched them with this instrument. And I felt at that time this was something, a purpose to give, to play for these patients. And so for the next 6 years, I volunteered for the music program we started there at the hospital called Sonata del Sol. Was a music program that we started for the Mayo Clinic. And so I did that for 6 years. And we had other flautists, guitarists, vocalists, harpists, and so on. We had to have a bit of a disclaimer about the harpists when they played. It's like, this is a real harp. Because some folks thought, whoa, I hear angels, and the harp was that. Oh, okay. Well, unfortunately, we did have to explain that. But yeah, that's what this was about. And I understood that the flute was a power. For some reason, that when you play this, there's a resonating feeling that you have. If you hear this in a very kind of acoustically sound room, you can actually feel the flute. I don't know if you felt it, but there's notes in here that resonate in the body chamber that either makes you calm or make you feel at peace or something. And there's a bit of a quality of that as interpreted as healing and so on. So that was the double chamber. Thank you very much. So when I playing the flutes, one of the things here's the mechanics of the flute, how it works. So this is a chamber, air chamber right here, up to this point here, which is the little fetish here that we have on top. But under this fetish piece, there is a secondary hole. You can see that? Can you see that one up here? So that's this chamber right here. The air goes in, and then goes up because there's a piece of wood right here in the middle of the two holes that you can't see through. So it blocks it. So it forces the air up, and then this thing helps direct it back down into the second hole, which is like this. And it's got to be in the right position. And it forces it back in so that you can play these holes, these notes here. So there's one chamber here, a block, and then the rest of this is the open chamber. So the airflow goes up, up, under, and back down and goes out. So that's the mechanics of this. So these fetishes actually have a purpose for channeling the air that you're blowing into that. So you can see that if you come up later and look at the flutes, and we'll take one apart. This is in the key of G, in case you're following along. Yay, got you the clap. That's funny. All right. So in 2007, I believe, my daughter and I, who's an artist here in the show, Raquel, her and I got to be a part of an art exchange. I wasn't a student, but I was teaching a class at a college, silk screening or printmaking class, and at the same time that summer they were going to go on a art exchange to New Zealand and Australia, and I thought, hey, I'll go, I'll whatever it takes. It's tough, but I'll go. And so they said, yeah, we need one instructor, and there's like 18 of us students, and myself and some other chaperones in that case. We went to New Zealand and Australia. So in Australia, we went to a community there, an Aboriginal community, Urenga people, and their community was right next to the Great Barrier Reef. They also had an island away from the body of the Australian land. There was an island out in the ocean. It was kind of a sand island. So we caught a little boat and went over to that island. And this is where they had ceremonial things happen out there. They had ceremonial lakes, ceremonial points, and so on. And they did all their ceremonial dances out there too. And so we were privileged to go out there. But, they also had tourists out there as well. They told us that we can't lay out on the beach because that's the highway to get around the island. So you get run over if you laid out on the beach because there's a Jeep always going by, taking tourists around. So it's like, I can't lay on the beach. But one of those days that we were there was a campsite they were staying at, and there was a fire pit and so on. And one day I heard this guy playing the instrument. How many know what a didgeridoo is? The didgeridoo. You at least know the sound. I heard of that. And I said, whoa, okay, I'm going to go check that out. And I went over there, and guy introduced himself. His name was Didge, short for didgeridoo, I think. And he was playing his didgeridoo. And it was probably over 6 feet long, and it made the sound. Wow. And he was just amazing with it. And circular breathing. And I tried to do that, but I almost passed out because it just like, I almost had it, but I just like, I can't, I'm going to pass out. So I said, well, you mind if I come and play the flute with you, and we'll try to figure out some stuff, or, didgeridoo and the flute. Since there was nobody out there, we sounded great. We did amazing. It's like unheard of. It's incredible. After we did that, it was like, yeah, that was okay. But there was a little cafe down the way from our campsite. Said, well, let's go down there and grab something to drink and talk some more about music. So I went down there with Didge, and we were sitting in a picnic table behind this little building that had a little cafe, little drinks and so on. But in the back of the cafe was an open area, a really big open area. And so we were sitting there, and I noticed that in this open area was a paper bag that was rolled up, and it was kind of plump. It was like right in the middle of this open area. And I go, I was thinking about that. What's going on with that? Same time I was talking with Didge and having a conversation about our music and so on. Yeah, we sounded great. I was like, and I was looking over at the bag, and then soon enough, I saw little ravens, young ravens, dancing around or hopping around this bag. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, that's what's going on. And talking to Didge some more and looked back, maybe about 7 of them arrived, and they were dancing around this bag. And I go, whoa, what is that? Is interesting. So I started watching, see what's happening. And they were pecking at the bag, and they're kind of biting at it and, hopping away, going in, biting. And all of a sudden, in the midst of all that, an adult raven came flying down in the middle of them, and they all dispersed a little bit, and they got, rock, rock, rock. he started getting mad at it. It sounded like he was getting mad. I can't speak Raven, but it was rock, 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 rock. And I think he was saying that, don't you guys know how to open this bag? Don't you know that there's food in here? The humans have given you food and you guys can't open this bag. And he seemed to be kind of irritated at, not them opening the bag. So he picked up the bag and flew straight up in the air, straight up, and let the bag go. And the bag came down, boom, fries and burgers for everyone. And he just flew back to his perch, and all the little young ravens started eating and eating. So I was like, oh my God, that was another experience. And I go, I don't know what this is going to do about my plane, but I'm going to take the didgeridoo and a little bit of that story and make a song out of that. And so, oh my God. So if you allow me to, and if you can kind of imagine that time and hearing that noise, I'm going to try to play the didgeridoo off of this flute because I could not fit a didgeridoo in my suitcase to bring it back. So I had to, stay with my own. But here we go. Here we go. We're going to try a didgeridoo sound off of the Native American flute. Thank you. I've collected over 25 different flutes to date that are really good. The ones I actually use. The others I just kind of have them as ornamentation, sort of speak. They look good, but they don't sound good in that sense. But I have about 25 working flutes that I rotate, and because I'm playing with other members of bands and groups and so on, other instruments, I have to have keys or performance keys. So I've actually bought specifically flutes that are in right keys, and I use a company called High Spirits. They're out of Arizona and in Patagonia. They create performance flutes, and so I can play with lots of different instruments. But I also buy flutes from artists who just hand make flutes. And because they have a different kind of technology and history and knowledge base, they tune their flutes a little differently. They tune it by ear, basically. And so it isn't always on key. It's kind of either above or below the key. But it's a great instrument, and I love the sound. So I usually play those kind of like solo in that case, so I don't have to play with another instrument. But if I did, I got to play the performance flutes and so on. So that's how I get away with the various flutes and so on. So this one is actually made by a friend of mine that created a double chamber flute. So which is a very interesting flutes. When I heard double chamber flutes for the first time, it was like what you heard when I was playing them. I was like, They make double chamber flutes. I was like, oh my god, I want one. I want one. And then they told me the price, and I was like, I gotta save up. I gotta save up for that one. But I eventually got them. I got the flutes that I wanted. But that's interesting that the technology for making flutes now are just like you have machinery that can make a lot of these flutes, and they some of these guys still make them by hand, which is really great. That they will cut a flute in half. There's two halves, and sometimes this is just one way of doing it. They'll cut the top and the bottom separately, and you'll have two halves, and they'll be you'll be able to see the chambers inside, and then they glue them back together, so then it becomes whole. Others will take an actual tool to bore out the whole entire piece of wood, just one piece altogether, and those are some of the more performance flute wise. Some of them have a tapered look to it, and it fits a little different. Some are more like the double chamber ones. It has, you have to slide back and forth with them, and they have a different piece of wood there. Others are pretty blunt, like this one here, which is a very bassy one. It has almost have to put your whole lip right there. But it's all about your comfortability trying to play the flute and then putting it right there. You just have to kind of try them out, test drive them if you can, for the most part. And that's what I've done. I choose some of the flutes that from my friends. They lay them all out, and I go, oh well, let me just try them out, and then the one that resonates with me, I go, oh, that's the one, because not all of them, even though they're made the same, may not sound the same or perform the same or feel the same. You kind of like it's almost like magic stuff. Like oh yeah, it's this one right here, and you kind of barter for that reason. So the other thing is traditionally when we played flutes in the southeast and in the southwest where I'm living now in Arizona, we have this combination of using river cane flutes. So this is one that is a river cane, and it's all natural. You have the natural knots in here that does the blocking for the air, and then it only has like three notes there. But it's not really meant to be like these type of flutes where have a performance. It just creates a sound. Now I don't know what this one sounds like because I haven't played in a while, but we'll see. And maybe that's all they meant to do is have that kind of sound, because when you're out there and in the wilderness and all of that and you have open space, these things are amazing. It's not about having a tuned flute or an orchestrated sort of sound. You just want to make that sound of the flute, and this is a natural sound. So that's a River King flute. So thank you guys so much for coming and joining me. I appreciate that. No.